Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to address such a large crowd, and I'm pleased to be sponsored by the Brown Club of Rhode Island, so I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to talk about three things tonight. First, I'm going to give you a tour of our program in Kenya, so we're going to go to Africa together. Then I'm going to talk about the international programs within the division, particularly of biology and medicine, and also the university. And then I'm going to talk about the Division of Biology and Medicine and give you a sketch of some of the things that we're doing and what we've accomplished over the last 9 months or so. So let me start out with a plane trip to Nairobi, Kenya. So I first went to Kenya with Jane Carter. This is in the year 2000. Jane was in private practice. She said, "Why don't we go to Kenya?" And I said, "Gee, that's a long ways away. I'm not sure I really want to do that." And she persuaded me to go, knowing that because of my interest and because what happens to most people is you get transformed when you go to a country like this. When you see the medicine, it's a remarkable experience. So let me give you a little bit of a picture of what happened. And I've been to Kenya a number of times. When you fly into the airport in Nairobi, you realize you're not in Rhode Island. You look out the window of the airplane and you see this. So there's a game park right next to the airport. It's remarkable. And so the wildlife in Kenya is a huge resource for this country. It's absolutely spectacular. And if you like photography like I do, it's a wonderful experience. So in this game park, you can see lots of different animals. The tourism industry in Kenya is very important. So the animals are absolutely wonderful. You can get close to some of them. I always like this picture because you have to stop your car sometimes in the road. And there's a family of baboons crossing, and I always think the dad is yelling at the kids to move a little faster. So from Nairobi, we took a car up through the Rift Valley, which is a spectacularly beautiful valley going northwest into the highlands of Kenya. It's about a 4 or 5 hour trip by car. This is where mankind evolved. Some of the earliest human specimens have been found in this area. It's a wonderful, wonderful landscape. The area around Eldoret, which is where we were headed, is like California in terms of its weather. It's wonderful. It's a mile high. It's very close to the equator, but it's cool at night. So it's a wonderful place to visit. It's also where the Kenyan runners come from. They run at altitude. So you can see them in the morning running along the landscape, and they also are absolutely spectacular. But when you come into Eldoret, this is what happens with a third world city. It's smelly. There's gasoline, there's diesel fuel, there are people walking on the streets, there's shacks on the side of the street selling all kinds of goods. The cars are old. It's very different than what we're used to. The roads frequently are not paved. Most Kenyans don't live in cities. They live in rural areas. There's subsistence farming. This is a typical hut. The families are large, they're poor. The average salary per day is $1 a day in Kenya for most of the people. There's also a portion of the population which is not getting enough food. They're starving at some level. This is our housing in Eldoret. So we have housing that was established by Indiana University. It's dorm-like housing. It's terrific. You all eat together. It's a little like camp. These are American students of all kinds, nursing students, medical students, undergraduates, faculty of all kind, and they've come to this center to partner with Moi University, which is the second medical school in Kenya. It's a very good school. It has many different parts of the university, but the medical school and the School of Health Sciences is an important part of this. So when we drive up from Nairobi, we stay in these housing, and then the next morning we walk about a half a mile to the hospital. And I'm going to show you a picture of two medical students. This is Jessica Burness and Katie Johnson, and I'll mention them in a little bit. They're terrific students. They're now family medicine physicians. They were over at least twice each working on the wards of this medical school, and again, I'll show you that too. So this is the hospital. It's a regional hospital, very busy. It's an institution which was built by the Chinese in 1990 or so. It serves as a referral hospital for a very wide catchment area for millions of people. The medical school itself is a British-oriented medical school, so the medical education is British. It's designed for resource-poor health care. So people are used to not having a lot of testing. They rely on physical diagnosis and on the history, and then make empiric diagnoses. The wards are different than what we're used to. So if you go into the Rhode Island Hospital, it's clean. There are lots of nurses and physicians around. There's lots of ancillary help. There's lots of testing. At Moy University, when we round on the services there, the wards are open. So there are many open bays, but with beds in the bays and patients in them. There's 1 to 3 patients per bed, depending on whether there's an epidemic or not. Patients are head to toe. They're in their street clothes. And then what's really different in terms of medical care is that there is uncertain testing. We almost always get an accurate CBC, a hemoglobin, a blood test, and a chest x-ray. The patients do have to pay for the tests. So if they can't come up with $5 for a chest x-ray, they don't get a chest x-ray. There are no codes. If somebody arrests, there's no CPR. There's no resuscitation because there's no ICU. There are no respirators which are available in general. There's oxygen, which can vary from the amount of oxygen you can get, usually an hour or 2 per patient, per visit, so no more. The drugs are very basic. So if you're a physician, the drugs work. There's like penicillin and chloramphenicol and digoxin. They're very basic drugs that we use, that I used as an intern, that still work, actually. And so, but we're used to much more sophisticated pharmacology in this country than they have there. The pace of medicine is different. So the Kenyan physicians don't move as quickly as we are used to. They don't work on the weekends as much as we're used to. So it's a very different culture in terms of the medicine itself. The consults, an urgent consult is coming back in 1 week or within 1 week. The students and the clinical officers, which are really like physician's assistants, and the interns take care of the patients. And I tell everybody, you do see exotic diseases. So you see malaria and tuberculosis and a lot of HIV, but you see a lot of internal medicine. So all of the diseases that we see in this country, we see in Kenya as well. Malignancies, heart disease, lung disease, all kinds of GI disease. So it's very basic internal medicine. And when we start out in the morning on these rounds, we start at 9 o'clock. And we have a group of students. This is an intern I work with on one of my trips. And this is the pharmacy. So the pharmacy was the cart that had all the drugs for that day. And it varied somewhat. So you had to know what was in the cart. And the nurse was there to give the medications. You can see in the background the cast iron beds. The Kenyans work very hard to keep the wards clean. The windows were open, so the breeze blew through. And that's not so bad, as Jane Carter can tell you, because the air exchange is excellent. So you don't tend to get tuberculosis on these wards. So the Americans, when they go over, don't convert their tuberculosis test. They actually are pretty safe. So there are good things about windows. The wards, though, when you go on them, are overwhelming. So the disease, these are young people with end-stage disease. The smells are different than our country. Jessica Burness, who's one of the medical students, when she first came onto the wards, she fainted. It was too overwhelming for her. And she went out, she recovered, and then she came back again, and she had trouble. She kept coming back to make sure that she was going to get that experience, and eventually she had a wonderful experience there. So I thought that was a very courageous thing she did. She was not going to be stopped by sort of this overwhelming experience. She was determined to follow through, and she did. Katie Johnson, the other medical student I pointed out, I remember working with me in the afternoons, putting in IV lines, saving patients. It was a remarkable effort on the part of Brown medical students. I was very, very impressed. So I'm going to show you just describe a couple of patients here. So we would typically have 25 to 40 patients a day that we saw in the mornings. We'd go and see each patient, examine them, decide what we were going to do for them. And just a few cases really struck me. So one was a 15-year-old boy who had congenital heart disease and had congestive heart failure, and he was dying. He had a disease, he had a coronary anomaly that would have been fixed in this country, but he didn't. So he was going to pass away, and it really struck me how tragic that was. We saw on this one day that I first rounded 2 cases of severe Kaposi sarcoma, a tumor associated with HIV. So a middle-aged man with severe infection in his lungs. He had empyema, something we'd never see in this country because we treat pneumonia early. A young man with malaria and hypertension, pneumonia, and jaundice, a series of young men with all of these diseases. We saw lots of tuberculosis, some unusual manifestations. And I can tell you about one case which struck me towards the end of my time there, of a young man who had tuberculous meningitis, and he developed hydrocephalus with this meningitis. So he had pressure on the brain. It's a treatable disease in this country. We put him on anti-tuberculous medications. We just needed to put a shunt, a plastic tube, to relieve the pressure. And we had to identify the problem first. So we got a CT scan initially. The family had to pay for that. It was $35. They had to go back to the village to get the money to pay for the CT scan. We got the picture. We saw the hydrocephalus. We knew what we had to do. I went to a neurosurgeon and I said, we just have to put in this tube and we can relieve the pressure and then save this young man's life. And he said, that's good, you got to go get a tube. This is, so I said, where do you get a tube? A tube store. So the family had to come up with some more money, $10 or $15, to buy this shunt. And I was leaving at that point. So I left on Saturday. They're going to put the shunt in on Monday to save his life, and he died on Sunday. So I couldn't get over that, actually. That was something which was so easily fixed. I mean, how much do we spend for lunch? It's like $10 to save this young man's life, treatable disease, and we didn't do it. So the lack of resources overwhelms you. Another very sad situation, a prisoner was handcuffed to the bed. So they bring in prisoners from the prison. You don't want to be in a prison in Kenya. It's a horrible experience. He had typhoid fever, a serious treatable illness, but he was handcuffed in a bed with another prisoner who was dying of liver cancer. So both of them were tied to this bed and had serious illnesses. And these are some pictures of some of the patients. So Kenyans are stoical. They are appreciative of the care. This is a young man who had type 1 diabetes. They're very somber. They don't smile. When you take the picture, they don't think you're supposed to smile. The Kenyans actually smile a lot, but he's not smiling. This man, I always like the Vikings sweatshirt. This man had myelodysplastic disease, which is a very difficult disease to treat in this country. In Kenya, he really didn't have much of a chance, but he was appreciative of the care that he was getting. So the experience there for our students and for people from this institution is transformative. People go over and they see this kind of medicine, you compare it with this country, and you can't get over it. Just a little bit of resources would make a huge difference there. When you come back here, I noticed the cars. We're driving around in a $25,000 car, and you think what it can do in this institution or for care in Kenya, and you just go a little crazy. And it never leaves you. So this is what happens with Kenyan medical students. With American medical students when they come here. They are absolutely changed. I think many of them for the rest of their lives. They come back to this country, but they always retain the memories, but also the connection often. We bring Kenyan medical students to Brown. Every year, Kenyan medical students and now residents come, and we just had a group of people come here, and they're overwhelmed by the experience here. It's like another world. So they see how much resources we're spending on our care, how inefficiently we do it. they can't get over everything about this country. They go down to East Side Market and they ask for a carton of milk, and it's like you go to the milk section and they just think milk, but we have buttermilk, 1%, 2%, skim milk, everything, and they can't get over the wealth, the opulence in this country compared to Kenya, or what it could do in Kenya. We started treating HIV patients in around the year 2000, and the way we did it was we brought drugs in our suitcases. And then we'd sort out the amount of drugs we had. I remember the first time we did this, we had enough drugs for 50 patients for 1 year. That's what we had, the resources. Because of President Bush, he started PEPFAR, and that's one of the really great things that he did during his presidency, and allowed funds to come into an area like Eldoret and provide care for thousands, tens of thousands of patients. So I think the numbers are up to 80 or 90,000 people who are under care, and another very large number, and I don't know the number, 50,000 or so, who are actually getting drugs, the antiretroviral drugs for HIV. It made a huge difference. It's one of the best programs in Africa. I know Dr. Carpenter's been there, and this is one of the best run programs in the world at this point. When we started treating HIV patients, though, we had some patients, particularly women, who did not get better when we started them on antiretrovirals. They didn't gain weight. So when you start somebody on treatment for HIV, they gain weight. These patients didn't, and the reason they didn't is because they were starving. They didn't have enough food. So Dr. Joe Mamlin, who runs the program in Kenya, started an experimental farm program. He got land donated by local tribes. He brought in an experimental agricultural expert. They set up a farm run by patients who had HIV. The managers were people who had HIV, and produced food. I don't know what this is. Does anybody know what corrupt it is? So it's good, I'm sure, but it's something which is an illustration of how successful this farm was in producing food for HIV. There are now 4 farms in this area run out of this program, which is really from Joe Mamlin from Indiana University, who is providing a large amount of food for people in this area, particularly those with HIV. This is one of the managers who was moribund from HIV, who was treated, and he wanted us to take his picture and show how healthy he was from this program. And this is his little, I think, a little girl who's like a Kenyan not smiling, but he's smiling because he's happy. So this is the program in Kenya, and I'll end up with just a couple of slides. So this program was established by Chuck Sherman from the Miriam Hospital in 1998. Jane Carter followed very quickly. I shouldn't really be here. This is Jane's program, who's done an absolutely spectacular job running it, growing it over the years. It, as I said, is a life-changing experience for all students, and it was certainly that was true for myself. And it gives you an awareness of healthcare issues, but also other countries and the issues with those. And it really connects you with the world. It's an amazing experience. So this is one of the programs at Brown for international medicine. I described some of the details here, and I won't really stay with this, but our students go over, we have students from Kenya, and there's work both in community we have a lot of research going on in Kenya, and I give some of the details here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some other programs. This is the second part of the talk. I'm going to talk about some of the other programs in global health at Brown, and we have lots of programs, not just in biomed, but in other areas as well. So Ruth Simmons, several years ago, started the Brown International Initiative. David Kennedy from the Harvard Law School was hired to be the Vice President for International Affairs. Launched in early 2008, and it's really building on our local areas and existing areas of excellence. And global health is one of those areas. So it's international initiative encompasses other initiatives like the Watson Institute, but global health is a key part of this. We have just sort of a baseline. We have at least 70 faculty of Brown from 12 different departments, and that includes from biomed as well as other departments involved in health and global health related research. We've generated over $14 million of funded research in 2006, and this has gone up, and we're involved in many different countries. We also have programs for our students. So these are in the medical school, but they're programs for undergraduates as well. So in the medical school, we have a burden of disease lecture and a burden of disease course, which involves global health. We have a scholarly concentration in global health. So this is where medical students major in a specific area during their 4 years of medical school. They take courses. They typically go overseas. They have projects. And it's a very, very popular concentration for our medical students. And just, I'm going to give you 3 examples of some of the programs. I already gave you one, which was Kenya. Another is in Population Studies and Training Center. So this is a large program with 30 faculty. Dan Smith is a key leader in this, and Michael White. And they have lots of research grants and do research on population-based questions. So in HIV, fertility, and other areas. So it's a very strong, very robust program outside of biomed in other departments. A second example is YRG Care for AIDS Research and Education. Ken Mayer from the Department of Medicine works in Chennai, India, and has research programs focused on women's health and reproductive rights. There's also a Fogarty AIDS program, which is a very prestigious grant to help investigators from other countries learn how to do research. We've trained 75 foreign scientists in a number of countries to come to Brown. They come to Brown, they get trained in research, and then go back to their institutions. This is a picture of YRG Care. It doesn't do it justice. I've been here. There's a large number of patients under care here for HIV, and there are many, many research projects. So one of the good things about being a chairman of medicine and a dean is I can travel to some of these places. Actually, as a dean, I can't. But as a chairman of medicine, I could go and visit some of these places. And this is a picture of India to me. So this is where the poor live, under blankets on the streets. Right behind them is a house of the rich. It's a huge discrepancy in terms of wealth in India at this point. India's come a long ways in terms of their economic health, but there's tremendous discrepancies. So we have a very active program in Chennai, India, and Kartik is on many slides, but he is an MD, PhD student who's here, who is doing his thesis on enhancing HIV secondary prevention in clinical care setting in South India. Kartik and I have published together from one patient that we saw together in India. He's doing a spectacular job. He's also the president of the student council, so he comes back and does great work here too. So a typical student at Brown, not typical, but a representative of a student at Brown, so does a great job. And the third area I want to just talk about very quickly is our expertise in HIV in general. So we have a grant where Chuck Carpenter, who's right here, is the principal investigator, and it focuses on national and international problems of HIV. It's a very successful grant which has been renewed. It includes both Tufts and Brown, 30 faculty in 11 departments. And I just want to say this is a grant out of a group, the HIV group and the infectious disease group at the Miriam Hospital and the Department of Medicine, which is world-renowned, which does spectacular research as well as clinical care. So we're very lucky to have this group. So those are 3 examples, in addition to Kenya, of some of our programs. We're also starting a global health initiative within the program in biology and medicine. So I've gotten together enough money to start this program. So we're going to have a center which will be a focus for students, a focus for research, and a focus for education. So we're going to try to provide a site, a physical site, a director, administrative help to help our students when they go overseas, to provide funding for that to some extent, to provide seed grants for research in this area and bring investigators together, and a focus for symposia and other talks, and also a focus for our educational efforts. So this will be an initiative to put some parts of this global expertise together at Brown. So I'm very excited about that. Another thing a dean can do here. So. And then I'm going to, very quickly, if I have time, I'd like to talk about the Division of Biology and Medicine just a little bit. So the Division of Biology and Medicine is one of the jewels in the crown of Brown. It's something which is under-recognized. I find that people don't quite appreciate how good the division is. It's very, very broad. It includes the hospitals and the hospital faculty, as well as the faculty on the campus. It's something which is growing, dynamic. I'm very privileged to be the dean of this group of faculty and students, and we're aiming very high. Our aim is to be one of the very best medical schools or divisions in the country. We want to be right at the top. We're in the top quarter at the moment. We want to be at the very top. And we're going to do that through programmatic growth in hiring faculty and research. So I came from the University of Pittsburgh. University of Pittsburgh is in the top 10 of medical centers in the country, and they became that way through just what I said, programmatic growth, hiring good faculty, and research. We have 3 parts to what I've labeled as both the Division of Biology and Medicine and the Alpert Medical School. So we have a program in public health. Associate Dean there is Fox Weddle. We have a program in biology, 6 different departments, headed by Ed Warrat, and then clinical departments. We have 14 clinical departments in the hospital. Just some very quick things. So the hospitals people forget about. We have 700 full-time faculty within our foundation. So these are people like in the Department of Medicine or surgery or pediatrics. They are the physicians who take care of you and your family. You may not recognize that. The other group we have are their community-based faculty, our volunteer faculty, 1,200. These are people primarily in private practice. Again, they're taking care of your families. Those are the physicians in Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts who I think are outstanding. Many, many of them came out of the Alpert Medical School and out of our training programs. And we have 700 residents and fellows in training. We have 400 medical students, 96 per year. We have, of that 96, we're moving towards 50% PLME, so those are the students who are admitted as freshmen to Brown and go through 8 years, and 50% who are admitted through the standard route. So they're coming from places like Williams College, where I went, or Amherst, or places like that. And then the undergraduates, this is a very popular area for the undergraduates to focus on and to be majors, to concentrate. So the biology departments in public health that is the most popular concentration for students. They love it. They love neurosciences. They love Mark Burtness, who's studying climate change and the effect of climate change on health. So this is us. This is we. We are in the top quartile of medical schools in terms of U.S. News and World Report, but we're just there. We fluctuate there, so we want to be better. The biology departments, we have 6 of them, and I'm just going to mention 2. Neurosciences, which is exciting, and which has some of the most innovative scientists in the country, in the world. John Donahue and his group, the Vision Group, are absolutely spectacular. The Ecology and Evolutionary Biology group, also in this area. Again, spectacular scientists studying things ranging from paleontology and dinosaurs to climate change to evolutionary change in bacteria. It's an absolutely spectacular group. Our public health group has 10 research centers which range from gerontology, studying the elderly, to a group studying alcohol and addiction, one of the most important problems in this country, to a very good statistics group. So absolutely, absolutely spectacular. I always mention that Brown University heavily supports the division. So we're very appreciative of the support from the corporation, from Ruth Simmons and the provost. They support us heavily. They put $174 million. The building you're in tonight is from a $100 million gift given to Brown and then given to the division. So the institution is heavily supportive. We have 7 outstanding teaching hospitals. The major one is the Rhode Island Hospital. Lots of specialty hospitals like Women and Infants and Butler for psychiatry and Children's Hospital. The hospitals are very supportive, and we have 14 clinical departments that I mentioned. There are 570, 600 faculty in those clinical departments, and they're terrific. Lots of very good people, lots of people doing research and teaching our medical students. So when I took over in June, I had this mission of becoming one of the best schools in the country, and we had 2 priorities, though. One of them was to put up a medical school building, and the second The second was to have better relationships with our hospitals. We need to have a much stronger, more robust relationship, both in terms of planning, but in terms of the hospital supporting me. We need resources from the clinical side to support our research and our faculty. Most medical schools do that. We don't do it as well as we could. So those have been the big priorities, and maybe the biggest is this medical school building. So it's very exciting. We received a $100 million gift from the Warren Alpert Foundation to name the medical school, but to support things like this building. So we're going to put this building right there. This is Providence from an airplane. So this is the Providence River. That's downtown Providence. It's College Hill, where we are now. Our public health building is on South Main Street, right near Hemingway's, right next to Hemingway's. So that's where our public health people are. This is 195, the worst highway in the world, being torn down. And then this is going to be the new highway. It's going to go like this and like this. So tearing down that 195 will open up the downtown. It'll provide more land. It'll also provide a park right here. Rhode Island Hospital is here. The total distance is 2 miles. So we want to put our medical school building right there. And we need a medical school building. We don't have an identity as a medical school. Somebody was driving by the provost the other day, and he said, "Where's the medical school?" And David Kurtzer, who's very smart, couldn't actually point to someplace which is the medical school, because we have a lot of buildings, but we don't have an identified place. So it's very important for our identity, for the students, and for our faculty as well. The Jewelry District, by the way, when I came here 10 years ago, had almost no research. Now it has blossomed in terms of research. There's $60 or $70 million of research from the hospitals and from Brown in that area. We were going to build a new building. So when I took over as dean in June, the stock market actually looked okay. And then in October, when we were going to present the new building, it didn't look so okay. So we couldn't go out and borrow money. So I was concerned that we would have to put it off. This site was recommended, and I was against it initially because I didn't want to have a second best. I'd much rather wait 2 or 3 years to put up a new building. But then I became convinced that this is the best building, actually, and I'll show you some of the reasons why. This is 222 Richmond Street, and this is not set in stone. We're not sure that this is going to be the site yet. We have to be approved by the corporation, but this is what we're looking at. 222 Richmond is an old jewelry factory. It was built in 1928. It has 70% of its surface are windows. So it's very light inside. They did that because they needed natural light for the manufacture of the jewelry building, jewelry itself. This sits on a site which I'll show you is very good. We have a parking lot right next to it, 380 parking spots, worth its weight in gold in this area. So it's very important for our students and faculty to be there. This building is very well constructed. It's like a fortress. They built these factories extremely well. It has the right amount of space for what we need. We've done planning for 2 years for this medical school building, and this fits pretty well, and I'll show you some diagrams of that. I didn't like it when I first looked at it, but now I've convinced myself it's a little Art Deco-y, 1928. So this is like, no, stay with me here. This is like a rounded corner. There's a little stuff up here. It's got horizontal lines. And I said to the architect, "This is like Art Deco." And he said, "That's not Art Deco." But to me, it's Art Deco. So this is a diagram of this area. This is that 222 Richmond Street. Richmond Street is here. Down here is the hospital. This is Eddy Street. And this is with the highway down. So the city is going to and actually obligated to build a park here, which is contiguous to the medical school building. There is going to be a walking bridge over to the other side of the river using the pilings of 195, interestingly. So this is where the 195 was. This land will open up, and Brown may at some point purchase this land. And when you build a medical school, you tend to have research buildings built around it. So I think that'll happen. The city hopes to have greenways, so they hope to have walking areas and parks in this area. These buildings are Johnson & Wales, so another institution. These are other Brown-owned buildings. The blue buildings are Brown-owned. This is the parking. This is Ship Street. This is my wife. I always embarrass her. She's a little nervous I'm coming this close. This is her building. She's so successful that she has a whole building for her research programs in behavioral medicine. So this will be a signature program in downtown Providence. Brown moving off of the hill to produce something new, taking an old part, an old strength of Providence, jewelry manufacturing, and turning it into a new strength, which will be biotech, education. The future is really in our hospitals and our institutions, and then what spins out of that. And Clyde Bryant has been a tremendous proponent of this, and this will be one of the first steps of that process. The building itself, this is some of the fit, and I'll just mention a couple of things here. So if you walk into that building, you're going to walk into Phil Grapusso's area, administrative. We have lecture halls, library, student areas. In the basement, we have a fitness center. This is for this generation of medical students. I didn't have a fitness center. This generation of students will have a fitness center. It's actually important for their health. On the second floor, we have something called the academy structure. I'm sure many of you have heard of that, but academies are a new idea in medical education. This generation of students thrives under social groups. So we're going to split the class up initially into groups of 30 or 40. They'll have a physical home. There'll be computers. There'll be advisors, senior advisors, clinicians. There'll be administrators, and they will be there for 4 years. It's like their home, their social group. So what happens in these is that they study together. When they leave in the third and fourth year, they tend to come back and socialize and get advice again. So it's a very important concept. This building will allow us to do that. So academies, we'll have 3 different academies. Then we'll have the anatomy suite where cadavers are dissected. This is the most popular course in the medical school, the anatomy course. It's run out of ecology and evolutionary biology. Go figure, you know, that's a group doing what you wouldn't think would be human anatomy, but there are anatomists in that group. So it's a very, very successful course, and then we're going to put that right in the building, and we have other areas as well. So the fit is very good in that building. And so this really will be important. It'll redefine the jewelry district. It'll be a showcase for Brown, and it should keep us competitive. So I'm going to stop there with a very optimistic view of a wonderful institution. We're on the move. We've made a lot of progress. We're going to keep that progress going. The global health programs I mentioned to you will be an important part of that. So I'm going to stop here and see if there are any questions. Be glad to take them.